Well, hello, I'm Dr. DeRionne Pollard, president of Montgomery College, and I want to thank you, our audience, for joining us today for our Discussion with Decision Makers series, where you can hear from key leaders about today's issues in Montgomery County. As the college president, my role is to make sure that our students receive an education that prepares them with skills that make them ready for the job market or to transfer. One workforce area in particular is fueling our community with ready early care and education providers and teachers. We know that our county and our state and nation, for that matter, not only needs more quality early child care providers, but it needs them to be prepared with the appropriate education training as well as business acumen so they can make sure our county's youngest residents are kindergarten ready. This is an important issue for our community, families, students, employers, residents, and educational institutions. Preparing Montgomery County's workforce starts from age 0 to 5. Early care and education supports the workforce of today and creates the talent, homegrown talent that we need of tomorrow. Accessible ECE is an equity issue as well, a social justice issue, and an economic issue. That is why it is my profound pleasure to welcome one of Montgomery County's exceptional leaders and a long-standing proponent and voice for early care and education, Councilmember Nancy Navarro. Councilmember Navarro is a member of the Montgomery County Council who represents District 4, which encompasses Wheaton, Aspen Hill, Oneonta, and Etchison. She is a former council president as well. In addition, she is a member of the council's Education and Culture Committee and chair of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. A former member of the Montgomery County Public Schools Board of Education, she's been an advocate for education and a friend to Montgomery College, and I'd like to also say a personal friend of mine. I want to thank you today, Councilmember Navarro, for joining me. I'm actually absolutely delighted that you're here.
I'm so happy that we finally were able to connect in this venue, and it's so good to see you. I know that we've been trying to do this for quite a while, and we were almost there on January, when was it? God, it was 6th. That's right. See, all my dates are getting all mixed. A very important date and a extraordinarily amazing moment when we were about to go live. And so I'm so glad that we were able to reschedule this, and I'm so glad that we are here.
And I want to ask you about that before we talk about early care and education, because I think it would be remiss if we didn't mention that. As you described, we were going to be doing this airing literally moments before the insurrection started in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol. And I have to tell you, I said to my team, there's no way we can do this right now because as a council member, I know that she's going to be uniquely tuned into what's happening there, thinking about the representations to our area might support the Capitol, but also there's a certain tone deafness if we went in on this issue, because right now everyone in the nation, dare I say the globe, is focused on what's happening on the Capitol right now. I'd love to just hear, briefly from you, some reflections you have about this moment that we find ourselves in. How do we start to have both accountability and the idea of forgiveness? I'm struck by those ideas.
Yes, that you're absolutely right. That particular moment was just so poignant because I, in many ways, understood what was happening, and it was not a pleasant feeling because, of course, I am originally from Venezuela, and although I left Venezuela in 1983, I have seen through the eyes of my family what that actually looks like, and I understood that this was literally a coup in progress. But to actually have to realize that in a split second, and then also realize that here we are, a short distance away from what is happening, that we are a jurisdiction that is right here next door, really truly had to quickly think about, all of the implications of that. How we move forward, I believe that we have just witnessed a transformational moment. I do believe that in many ways this pandemic, along with the renewed reckoning with systemic racism, and then this particular event I believe are transformational. And I don't think we can continue with business as usual. I think we need to learn these lessons, and we need to understand that maybe we were lulled into this sort of sense of complacency, and that democracy is fragile. And I personally, because I did grow up at a time in Venezuela, it was just, this booming country with an extraordinary economy, never in a million years thought that I would see the decline. And so having had that experience, I am fiercely protective of democracy, and fiercely protective of how we need to come together and iron out all of our differences that will never be completely ironed out. We can always agree to disagree, but to take it to that level of fear that then has fueled this violence, we all need to take responsibility for this, and again, work very hard to protect this very fragile gift that is democracy in the United States, the most powerful country in the world. So there's a lot of work to do.
There is, and I often talk about the fact that in a well-formed democracy, it's our job to protect the last, the least, and the littlest. And I think that's a good transition to talk about early care and education, because we know this is profoundly important to our county and certainly to the colleges. We really strive to build a quality ECE workforce. You, though, have been a longtime advocate of our work in this space. And I know that you have a strong background in supporting education overall. I'd love to help our audience understand how you came to be such a powerful advocate for this important issue. Will you tell us about how you came to be one of the leading voices advocating for early care and education, and how did you come to this place to really be leading this work right now?
Sure. Like many things that the one becomes passionate about, it really started with personal experience. As a 27-year-old mom here in Montgomery County, my husband and I were just starting out, and I had to then go through this process of trying to identify quality, affordable childcare for my beautiful daughter. And it was a struggle. And that really led to a pivotal moment where I literally quit my job and started to proceed to get to become a licensed family childcare provider so I could be home with my daughter, have an income, and then also care for other children. But that meant that I was putting my professional career on hold, and it was a big trade-off, but one that was important to me. And once I closed the family childcare program, because my daughter then was about to go into kindergarten, I started thinking about all of these women that I would find, and mostly they were women, I would encounter in playgrounds, et cetera, who were unlicensed childcare providers, and the connection to the academic achievement gap, because I had already started to research what this academic achievement gap was all about, because of course my daughters being Afro-Latinas, Black, beautiful little girls, I knew that they were going to enter a school system that had these issues, and I wanted to inform myself. And so that led to this idea of creating a project to help mostly, immigrant Spanish-speaking women become family childcare providers licensed, and then just, snowballed into an organization, a nonprofit organization. So I worked leading that from scratch, built this organization, but then started to really understand the connection and the intersection between high quality, affordable, accessible early care and education, and the challenges that many of our low-income families were facing. And long story short, but that is what propelled me to basically put my name out for an appointment to the Board of Education in 2004, because I felt that I could now be at the table making decisions, directly also integrating, the importance of early care and education to the K-12 and beyond education space. And so that was always very near and dear to my heart. And, things like bringing Centerina to Montgomery County, that had, I worked hand in hand with then Valerie Irvin, who was council member, was the chair of the education committee on the council. And we worked together to really begin to expand a lot of the availability. But I'll be honest with you, especially after the recession, early care education there was a lull in Montgomery County, in my opinion, because we were all, of course, trying to address all of these other challenges that were happening. And that was always in the back of my mind, that I wanted us to reclaim this space and really be serious. And In 2011, the Obama administration, appointed me to one of their commissions on educational excellence for Hispanics, and I immediately volunteered in the early care and education subcommittee to understand what was sort of the national landscape. What I could identify perhaps as best practices to bring to Montgomery County. What were those barriers? And I literally walked away from that experience with two very big takeaways. One, that we needed to reframe the importance of early care and education, reframe it as a socioeconomic imperative. That was key. And I came back to Montgomery County and I would constantly say that on the record. This is a socioeconomic imperative of our times. We have to solve this issue. And number two, that we needed a dedicated funding stream because we needed to scale up our initiatives. And within that, you had to factor in education, preparation for the workforce, subsidies for those who need it most, making sure that we had this availability of quality slots throughout the county. And so those two elements, I think, were really always with me. And I began to work with colleagues, leading on some particular pieces of legislation, really positioning particular, high-level positions in the administration, beginning to fund some initiatives. But then came the moment in 2019 when there was this transition in our county of a new executive and also new council. And I positioned myself to be president that year to usher in this transition. And one of the first people that I reached out to was you to say, okay, Dr. Pollard, Montgomery College is pivotal in this, comprehensive, robust, holistic initiative that we need to launch. And you were one of the first people that said, yes, we're in. And so there, began this process of putting together this early care and education action plan with specific metrics and with money to back it up. And so this is where we are now. Thus far, FY20, we invested $7 million. FY21, we invested 10. And the goal is that by FY24, we would have invested $20 million in this initiative with specific metrics. And folks, we're on target. Thus far, there's been a creation of 1,265 slots. We've been able to address things like WPA eligibility guidelines, so the middle class folks can also access this. We've been able to, work with you as well when it comes to preparation of our workforce, which is so pivotal. But with the pandemic, of course, we also realized that there are some urgent needs out there. And so the council thus far has approved a total of about $14 million of relief, direct relief to childcare, centers and childcare providers, et cetera, because we need them to be there when the economy reopens and when everything comes back. And so I feel like we're sort of on parallel tracks because one issue is to continue to address this, early care education initiative and all of its goals. And another one is to make sure that because of the pandemic, that we are also shoring up this industry because again, they're going to play such a pivotal role in the recovery.
I want to really amplify this point you're making because it struck me profoundly, and as you told your personal story, that you had to leave the workforce in order to be able to take care of your children. And here we are several years later in the midst of a pandemic, and we see a lot of that happening right now. And I want to talk about the critical role that ECE plays with the economy. As I mentioned when we started this conversation, we know the quality and affordable ECE supports the workforce of today and will build homegrown talent for tomorrow. Employees can get to work knowing that their children are well cared for, engaging in developmentally appropriate learning to be kindergarten ready. And we know that's essential. When children come to kindergarten ready to learn, they're more likely to graduate from high school as prepared students for post-secondary education, whom also become workers in our economy and really help us thrive in our community. And I love how you talked about this economic imperative, the social justice imperative. I'd love for you as a county leader, can you help us better understand all of the connections between early care and education and the important role that it plays in a local economy? Because I think a lot of people say, well, I don't have kids right now. This isn't my issue. Or, I am able to put my kids in, private care over here, or we do this in our home. But what they're missing, I think, is the macro issue of what this means for our local economy. I'd love to hear your thinking on that, Councilmember Navarro.
Sure. So let me start by this. There was one particular article that I read during the last recession, the recession of 2008 to 2011, roughly. I guess we were kind of going through that, where this article described how of all the developed nations that were facing the recession, they all had declining birth rates. And here in the United States, we had an aging population, but we also had a young population coming through. Now, when you look at the demographics of that young population, it's primarily children. And so when you then look at what's happening with our academic achievement gap, opportunity gap, you see that it disproportionately affects our children of color. And so for me, that was an aha moment, because it was kind of like, all right, well, if that is the case, then, where are we going to be, the United States? Where is our economy going to go if the majority of the young people that are coming up are not doing as well academically, don't have as much access to opportunities, et cetera? How are we going to compete in this globalized economy? That also trickles down to the local jurisdiction. Not only because, of course, you want to continue to position the county as a place where companies want to come and their employees want to live, but they also want to have access to a pipeline of talented folks and folks who are ready to take on these jobs. I mean, if we are to grow jobs, we want to make sure that we also have that workforce ready here in the county. So that's really critical. But there's another element, which is, we have this extraordinary school system, K through 12, school system. It's so interesting to me that over 60% of the young people that go, that are put in ESOL, for example, in Montgomery County Public Schools, over 60% are US citizens. And so here we have a situation where you have all these beautiful children who were born in this country, but because they have not been in quality early care and education, their language development skills are not up to par. So when they enter kindergarten, they're immediately tracked into ESOL. That's a problem, right? We also know that by the time they enter kindergarten, so many of these children, as you mentioned, are already behind when you compare them to their peers, disproportionately Black and brown children. And so then you have to remediate. Well, it's much more expensive to remediate, not to mention the human cost, but in terms of taxpayers' money, it's much more expensive to remediate. And then again, you have that long-term concern about, who is going to take those jobs that we need to take? Look, you have implications in all kinds of ways. If we can bring more jobs to Montgomery County, it cuts down on commute time, it helps the environment, right? But if these young people are not able to access those jobs, where are they going to go? There's just a lot of different ways that you can look at this. And so for me, intervening in these first 5 years, it's not just a moral thing to do, it's also, again, the most fiscally responsible thing to do. And it helps us, right? If you want to be selfish in a way, it helps us ensure that we maintain our competitive edge. Sometimes when I talk about this, I say, hey, I'm sure folks want to, people like me and my age, want to make sure the Social Security is solvent by the time we get there. So we need to make sure that all these young people are equipped with the skill sets. And that starts in the first 5 years, which is why the workforce is so critical. I used to say, this is the most important job in this world. Yes. You are forming literally human beings. You are helping the brain development, these, very important social and emotional intelligence skills, you're fostering that. And my gosh, I can't think of any other, job that is as important as such. And so that is why we have to see this from that perspective. And that way you take it away from, oh, this is a women's issue, or this is a personal responsibility issue because, why did you have that kid? Then you have to, no, this really affects almost every single policy area that you can think of surrounding us, which is why we all have to really pay attention, and we should all support investments in early care education.
I love this what you've amplified here in terms of the far-reaching implication of not having a robust early child education program. And as the college president, I'm always thinking about what can Montgomery College do to really help strengthen the economy. I know that we offer degrees and certificates in early care and education, and we smooth the pathway between our non-credit and credit programs to meet students where they are. We have some outstanding faculty who've been doing this work, and we want to help students advance along the learning continuum from a skilled childcare provider to a teacher and an owner or operator of their own business. We've also provide professional development courses every semester for ECE educators across the DMV region. I'm amazed. I've been to that event several times, the hundreds of people who show up for that. And these courses can lead to national credentials, the Child Development Associate, awarded by the Council of Professional Recognition. So as we look to develop and strengthen the county's early care and education workforce, what role do you see Montgomery College playing? When you had this idea, one of the first people you called, you saw a role. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on how Montgomery College can provide more teachers and skilled childcare workers.
Well, you just described the different programs that Montgomery College offers. And, believe you me, Montgomery College is pivotal. Even way back when I was running Center for Media, we partnered with Montgomery College. Actually, we were able to create, ESOL classes that were context-based, so it was all about the jargon of, childcare and the early care education industry. We knew that as, our participants went through the basic training, the minimal training, that they could always continue to do more. And we used to say, you have to do more, go for your CDA. And it was always Montgomery College is that place of, the highest quality. When we developed the partnership with Montgomery College, and I'll share this because it was so critical, we were able to provide those ESOL, classes at Montgomery College classrooms. We wanted these moms mostly to be sitting in a Montgomery College classroom so they could see themselves,
Yes.
And they could aspire, to do more. And you would not believe the tears that we saw of joy and pride of many of these women who never thought that they would someday be there, but now they could be proud and tell their children, you're going to college, and Montgomery College is a place for you. Look what Mom is doing. And so there are so many connections and so many aspirations and opportunities that folks are seeking, and they find that in Montgomery College. So for me, this is, we're so fortunate. I always talk about how Montgomery County, we're so fortunate to have so many assets. Yeah. That's what Montgomery College has done. It has provided that answer to so many to further their education, to aspire for more. And as you said, there is a very significant path there. I mean, there are people who decide, yes, I want to continue my education, and maybe I then, go for higher, maybe a bachelor's degree, maybe a master's. I mean, this has happened, and we need that because it's interesting when we talk about equity, when you look at the workforce, the early care and educational workforce, again, it's predominantly women of color. And so if we're able to provide those pathways, we can also, address that issue of not having enough diversity, for example, in the teaching profession. I mean, there are so many pathways here for us to work on. But compensation is going to be, continues to be a challenge, and that is something that we need to advocate for as well, because appropriate compensation, benefits, and things like that are always critical, especially for something of this importance.
Well, and valuing the work, I think, is so critical. In the last 5 minutes we have here, I really want to get your ear a little bit broadly. I know that we're going to get ready to start the Montgomery County Council, start reconvening in this new year, really tackling some important issues that we're facing as a county, certainly even as a state and nation. And I wonder if I could get you for a few minutes just to talk to us about some of the issues that you see the council taking on in the coming weeks and months ahead. Do you have some specific goals and anything that you want to tell us about that we should be thinking and keeping our eye on?
So personally, if it was up to me, I'll be honest with you, I would be focusing the work of the county council on COVID-19 recovery, but specifically on now the vaccine phase out. This is a major undertaking. And so I think that COVID-19 related efforts to get us to that place where we can start really talking about full recovery. Also, how to position the county in its best fiscal footing. As the chair of the Fiscal Policy Committee, this is a very important issue because, luckily with the new administration, there is a recognition that local jurisdictions need help. But we need to make sure that we are positioning the county vis-a-vis our fiscal policies in a very strong place. That in itself, it's huge. So if it were up to me, I would say, let's focus on our upcoming budget, the priorities, but more than anything, our COVID-19 recovery, all of those elements that are included in there. Just with that, you have a full agenda. But of course, we have other things that we're going to continue to work on. And as you know, racial equity and social justice, it's front and center for me as the author of that legislation. So everything that we're doing, we're seeing it through that lens. And that is something that is critical for our county. So a lot happening, a lot going on. But I am hopeful that we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and especially with the new administration, hoping that they will very soon be able to assess and address the issue of increasing the vaccine production and then also the distribution. At this point in time, simply does not have enough vaccines, even to where the state, has announced they want to move to. And that is going to be critical if we're going to recover. Right. And we can then, get back to everything else that we're doing. So that's, it's a big agenda, but we'll keep working together.
What I love about that is this agenda that you describe is that we have to be able to hold two thoughts in our minds at the same time. Part of that is dealing with and grappling with the recovery of COVID-19 and all that it has wrought on our community. And at the same time, positioning the county for the future, because you don't get to recovery and rebound unless you have a vision in mind and all the policies that have to align for that to happen. I want to thank you, Councilmember Navarro. You always are one of my favorite people, and not just simply because of just your wonderful personality, but your thought leadership and your rigor that you bring to this. You've helped us really bring light to the important issues in Montgomery County to strengthen our ECE system and workforce and all the efforts the county and why this is important. You don't just speak to having to do it, you give us the why. And I really want to thank you for all you do for our county and for Montgomery College. At some point, I'm going to come back and talk to you about what are you going to be doing next in your life, because I think that's always an important thing, because I want to be close in your win, because I know you have some great things happening in your mind. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our Decision Maker series. This is truly a valuable conversation about quality and affordable childcare, and more importantly, how we're all in this together. I often have this quote that talks, in the end, we'll ultimately be judged as a community about how we treat the last, the least, and the littlest. And for us, this conversation was so important today. I hope that you all stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and practice social distancing. And tune in next time for our next Decision Makers series. Thank you. Be well and take care.
Thank you.